You're listening to Mammal Watching with Charles Foley and Jon Hall. You can find other episodes at mammalwatching.com/podcast.
This is Charles Foley from Minneapolis.
And this is Jon Hall from New York.
How are you, Jon?
I'm getting over COVID, so I'm okay, but I've been better. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. I am just back from a very nice trip to Ecuador, but I will not talk about that today because we are actually going to jump straight in to our interview with our guest today, Terry Townshend, who is speaking to us from China. And I should just point out that at the start of the interview, there is a little bit of interference online, but that does clear up. So please bear with us.
Yeah, please do. It's a great interview, I think.
Charles and I are very happy to be joined this morning, or this evening for him, with Terry Townshend, a British conservationist and environmentalist who's been living in Beijing for the past 12 years. Terry's a former British public servant who moved to China and started work with the Paulson Institute there, working on environmental issues. He also works with the Shan Sui Conservation Center at Beijing University. He tells us he's primarily a birder, but he's really got into mammals recently and he's seen some amazing things. Welcome to the podcast, Terry.
Well, thank you very much, Jon. It's an honor to join you and Charles today. I feel a little bit of a fraud on a mammal podcast being a birder, but I hope you won't hold that against me.
Never.
Oh, yes, we will, Terry. But anyway, welcome to the podcast. Perhaps you could start out by telling us a bit about yourself and how you ended up working both in conservation and in China.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a long story. And I think I'm quite late in sort of getting to conservation, which is really my passion and has been for many years. You know, I started watching birds when I was just 4 years old, born and bred in East Norfolk in England, a little village called Winterton-on-Sea. And people who might know that part of the world will know that it's a fantastic area for bird watching in particular. And Winterton-on-Sea has a wonderful nature reserve. So I was really spoiled growing up. And I think that's really what got me interested in nature, was that close proximity. But then sort of career-wise, I was strongly advised to not to go into anything environmental, sort of going to a local state school there. The big local employer was Insurance Norwich Union. And so they told everyone to study business type subjects. And, not being of strong mind at that age, I sort of took that advice and ended up studying economics at university, or environmental economics, and went into UK government working on climate change policy. And then a few years later, I moved from government to work for an NGO called Globe International, working in particular on environmental legislation. So we were looking at, we work with cross-party legislators in many different countries around the world to try to advance environmental legislation, sort of build a common understanding on many of the key environmental issues of the day, including climate change. And China was part of that. And so I came to China in 2010 and worked with the National People's Congress Environment Protection Committee. And then at the end of 2 years, the NGO that I was working for completely lost its funding overnight. So I was sort of stuck in China, having effectively been made redundant, and sort of with a big decision to make. Do I go back to the UK and do the sensible thing and sort of get another job, or do I try and make a go of it in China? And after 2 years here, I'd started to explore around, and I really loved it. It was so culturally different. The country is vast, and there are some spectacular places, from the high mountains of the Tibetan Plateau to the taiga forests of the northeast, to the incredible, temperate forests in Sichuan, the deserts in Inner Mongolia and Xinjiang. It was just, this sort of huge, amazing place for me to see. And what struck me in the few trips that I'd made around China was just how much wilderness there was still remaining in China. And so I spent a couple of years really just doing completely pro bono work. And I was sort of on the verge of having to pack it in. And then very fortunately, I met Hank and Wendy Paulson, who are big conservationists and also birders. And they said, please come and help us, in the Paulson Institute, sort of 3 days a week. And, that will pay you so that you can then do all the other things that you want to do the other 2 days a week. Which was an incredible moment for me. It meant that I could stay in China and I could continue to do all of these pro bono projects, as well as being able to pay the rent. So, so it's quite a journey, really. Completely not planned.
Let's talk a little bit about your views on conservation in China, because from the outside we often hear the negative things, the Yangtze River dolphin having gone extinct, for instance, and also China being a major driver of the illegal wildlife trade through Chinese traditional medicine, etc. But there's also a lot of good that's also happening there. So what is your view on conservation in China, and what do you think the priorities are?
Yeah, well, I think this is a really important question, because I think, you're right, in the media, you generally don't hear so much about the good things. It's generally the bad things that you hear about. And of course, for a country the size of China, the picture is complicated. It's mixed. I mean, what I would say is that, when I first came here in 2010, the air pollution was awful. And probably 2/3 of the year, you would be exposing yourself to unhealthy air if you went outside. And I think since then, there's been a huge change. So at that point, China was sort of coming to the end of its policy of economic growth at all costs. But all of that came at a tremendous cost to the environment. So there was very serious air pollution, very serious water pollution, and soil pollution. I guess around 2012, the government realized that the middle classes, many of whom have been overseas, I think they started to demand really that China cleaned up its act. They were losing their best people to go overseas. And I think the Chinese government realized this wasn't sustainable. So Xi Jinping, when he came into power, he's coming towards the end of his second term now, but when he came into power, he talked a lot about something called eco-civilization. You're not being able to have a healthy economy without a healthy environment. So seeing a much more balanced approach to economic growth. And I think that was the point at which you started to see significant efforts to clean up the environment in terms of pollution. So the air pollution, got steadily better, and that, today it's unrecognizable from 10 years ago. And I think sort of underneath this rhetoric of eco-civilization, we've seen a number of very positive policy changes, updated the list of protected species. So previously it was just the big megafauna, really, sort of like panda, and the big birds like cranes and so on. Now it's been updated to reflect the fact that there are many species that are in danger of extinction. And so that's all been updated. And then I think we've also seen the creation of national park system in China. So we now have vast national parks, Sanjiangyuan on the Tibetan Plateau. I think it's somebody said it's about the same size as Florida. And then of course we've also got a new system of evaluation of government officials. So previously, if you were a local government official in China and you had national ambitions, the way to do that would be to deliver GDP growth. That was the only thing that mattered. Now, local government officials have environmental criteria, which are given equal weight to the GDP delivery. So that has created a huge demand for environmental related projects, because if you're an ambitious local government leader, you've got to tick that box. So you need to show that you're delivering on environmental criteria. The direction of travel at the moment is the right one, and it's a very exciting place as a conservationist to be right now, because you really feel that you're working in line with government priorities, and there's a lot of optimism. There's a lot of young people now getting into conservation. There's a lot of, I think there are now more than 100 birdwatching societies across China. Back in 2000 there were only 3.
Jon, I think you're going to have to set up a mammal watching branch in China.
I'd love to. 1.3 billion people, potential members. It's really reassuring. I mean, a lot of my work has been at least the theory of doing exactly that, of balancing environmental and economic growth. And, I've talked about this in so many places, and it sounds wonderful on paper, but the reality is in many places, nothing ever really changes. But as you say, when China decides to do something, it gets it done. And it's, it's very reassuring to hear it's working there.
Yeah, the top-down system has its advantages. Because if the leader says, I mean, the number of government meetings I go to now, where always the first thing that they say is Xi Jinping said this, and we have to implement this. So it's almost quotes from his speeches that is their marching orders, and it it goes all the way down. There's no challenge to that. So when it's in your favor, it's great.
As long as he's saying the right thing, it's all good.
Yes, exactly.
So Terry, I think the first time I came across you was something you put on Facebook, probably about the Valley of the Cats. And I've heard stories about this fabled place where, it's overflowing with different species of rare wild cats. Can you tell us, I mean, you've been there, I know. So can you tell us about it, how it got its name, and just tell us a story?
Yeah, so it's a place, it's located, it's actually, the nearest town is called Angsai, which is a little community town. Obviously doesn't quite have the same ring as Valley of the Cats to Westerners, hence the new name, and I'll come to that in a minute. But it's a small community of herders. So the families that live there are yak herders, and they're sort of semi-nomadic, and it's quite an unusual part of the plateau in that it's not sort of flat and treeless and barren. It lies on the edge of the Mekong, the upper reaches of the Mekong River, and it's quite a spectacular valley. And the hillsides there have trees. It's quite they're wooded hillsides, so the character of the place is quite different to most of the plateau. And I was invited there in 2016 by Shanshui Conservation Organization, so Conservation Center. They're quite a young NGO set up by Professor Lu Zhe, who's probably China's most famous conservationist. She used to work with George Schaller and with WWF on Giant Panda many years ago, and she since focuses now primarily on the Tibetan Plateau, and in particular on community-based conservation. She's passionate about involving communities, and so they were organizing something called a Nature Watch Festival, and these festivals they organize one every year, and it's to bring together lots of young people who are interested in nature into one particular location. And the idea is that you do sort of a bio blitz. It's like a sort of a 3-day biodiversity survey, because many of these places have not been properly surveyed before. And so one sort of quick and dirty way to get a reasonable handle on what's there, is to have lots of eyes around for 2 or 3 days. And they do this in a very fun way. You sort of have teams of 3 people, and they hire the local people to act as drivers. So each team gets a driver, and they say, right, 3 days, go and photograph as many birds, mammals, plants as possible. And we'll have a competition and lots of prizes, and it's basically a lot of fun. There's a big camp. You're camping there. The local people provide the food and run the camp. And every day, you set off with your driver. You can go, and you have a sort of a boundary, where a playing field, if you like, and off you go. And so I was invited by Shanshui to this particular festival at Angsai, and they invited me to be a judge on the birds. So for all the birds that people were seeing, I would help identify them, hopefully, and sort of be able to judge the different teams, so on. And on the first day, there was a team of 2 students from Peking University, very young. Most teams had 3, they only had 2. And so Professor Liu said to me, "Oh, would you mind going out with these 2 students? They're not very experienced at nature watching." And I thought, well, yeah, sure. As a judge, I was going to be sitting in the tent all day. So I thought, yeah, great, opportunity to go out. And of course, we were the last team to leave because there were students. They got up late. Everyone else had set off, and everyone else set off and gone further into the valley, sort of deeper into the valley. And we thought, okay, there's like 20 cars gone that way. We'll go the other way. And so we went the other way, and we very quickly found a little side valley, and we drove in as far as we could go with the vehicle. And we thought, oh, this looks good. We'd already passed flocks of white-eared pheasants just by the side of the road. We'd seen red fox, we'd seen hares, and we thought, okay, this is going to be nice. A nice walk into this valley. And we get out the car, and literally straight away we meet a Tibetan family who live. There's one house in this valley, and they said, "Oh, sometimes," he said, "if you're interested in seeing animals, he said, sometimes we get snow leopards behind our house." And we were like, "What?" And we sort of checked, do you really mean snow leopard? I didn't mean something else, sort of lost in translation. And no, it was definitely snow leopard. And it's like, really? So yeah, we see him quite a lot, So the son in the house took us up. We walked up the back and sort of up onto this hill, and it was sort of, I guess, lunchtime, sort of midday, 1 p.m, something like that, by the time we got up there. And we started scanning, and it was a wonderful place. And we saw lots of blue sheep. It was just like, wow, this place is spectacular. I guess it got to about 3 p.m, and we knew it was about an hour and a half to get back to the camp, and we had to be back at the camp at the latest by 5:30 because the party secretary was coming to greet everyone to sort of open the festival. So we had to be, and me as a foreigner, the only foreigner, I was sort of paraded as a special guest. So I had to be there at that time. And so we sort of got to the point where we thought, okay, we're going to have to sort of start ambling back. And I thought I'd just have one more scan, with the binoculars. And suddenly I sort of on this rock that I'd looked at this rock for probably 20-30 times, suddenly there was a lump on the rock.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, I'm sure that wasn't there before. and had the telescope with us, and so set the telescope up on it, and there was a snow leopard head staring back at us, and we were like, wow. Oh my god. And so the local guy, who took us up, sort of was like, yeah. It's like what you'd expect.
Told you.
Yeah, told you. Exactly. For him it was just normal. He was quite interested to see it through the telescope. And sort of we were extremely excited, obviously, and that was the point where I realized I'd left my adapter to take video down in his house. And I thought, oh, I can't not get video of this. Nobody will believe us if we don't get any proof. And so I literally ran down to the house, and I think that was the fastest 100 meters I've ever done. And it was probably my slowest ever 100 meters coming back up at 4,000 meters, trying to run up, and I thought, is it still there? Is it still there? Yes, it was still there. So I managed to get some video. And then, I guess we've been watching it half an hour or something. And that was the point where we realized there were 2. So the second one hadn't moved at all. And it was in full view the whole time. We just hadn't seen it. I was like, oh my God, there's 2. so we managed to get some footage, and then of course we had to leave, and we got back to the camp, and I remember the organizer, the guy who works for Professor Liu, who sort of organized the whole event. We were the last people back, and he said, "Oh, how did you get on?" And I thought, do we tell anyone? So I sort of whispered to him, "Oh, I don't know if you want to tell everyone, but we saw 2 snow leopards." And he was like, "Oh my God!" He like shouted to everyone, "They saw 2 snow leopards!" They were like, so it caused quite a commotion, and the party secretary was really excited, and the media were there, the local media, and they were really excited. So to see the footage, and so it sort of suddenly became a big thing, and the party secretary was really, really happy. Yeah, and that was the start, really, because I think the thing that shocked me about that encounter was that these leopards didn't care that we were there. And we were just a few hundred meters away, and they were so relaxed. And I thought, I think before this, I thought if I ever lucky enough to see a snow leopard, almost certainly I'm just going to see a tail disappear over a ridge, and it'll see me first and it'll be gone. These 2 were just so relaxed, and I thought this speaks volumes about the relationship between the local people and the cats, because if there was any kind of persecution going on, I don't think they would have tolerated that, our presence, that proximity. And so I just mentioned to the party secretary, that people pay a lot of money to go and see snow leopards around the world, and they generally go to Ladakh in India. There might be an opportunity to do something here, small scale, involving the local people, so that you can help boost some local incomes here for a relatively poor community. And he came back a couple of weeks later and said, "I really like this." And then next thing I know, I'm on a plane, about to do training with 15 local families about how to host visitors.
Right.
Wow.
I never thought I'd be the one that would be involved in doing it. I said, "I've got no experience about it," and they said, "Oh no, we don't want you to get other people in. We want you to help us." And so, yes, I think it's been definitely the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life, working with these communities. Because on the plane going there, I remember thinking, are these Tibetan herders really going to come to a training center? Are they going to sit in a classroom and listen to people? And I was worried about the language barriers. Their main language is Tibetan. My Chinese is, not very good. Their Chinese is not very good. So lots of things to worry about. But actually, they were a joy to work with. And they taught us far more than we taught them. We got an optics company very kindly donated a pair of binoculars for each of the families. They don't need them, I can tell you.
Right.
They absolutely don't need them. Their eyes are incredible. And we got them books also on Tibetan Plateau wildlife, sort of to identify things. And they didn't know anything about the birds. They knew a lot about the mammals, about the snow leopards, the wool. They know exactly where to go to see them. They know their habits. And these guys are now, all these families are now involved in the conservation projects. So they set up and monitor camera traps, infrared cameras, and send that data back to Peking University, to the researchers, which saves a lot of money and effort in terms of travel and all logistics and everything. So they're actively involved in the conservation, as well as the tourism side of it. And
did they? Sorry, just a quick interruption. What did they make of the idea that people would spend thousands and thousands of dollars all over the world to come and stare at these animals that they have in their backyard?
They didn't believe it. Yeah. They didn't believe people. They were like, they're always here. They've been here for generations. This is normal. Why would people come here? That was sort of the reaction at the beginning. They're a little bit perplexed that people might come to see the animals, but very quickly they got into it. As I say, you saw all those worries melt away at the beginning, you know, because they were so enthusiastic, and their natural hospitality, you know, is incredible. I think for anyone who's ever been to the Tibetan Plateau will agree. You know, they're just the most hospitable people, and you know, a lot of people think they're poor, right? So materially, they're not particularly wealthy, obviously, but personally, I think they're incredibly rich. You know, you think about it, they've got no stress. They don't have a mortgage. They step out of their front door every morning. They've got this incredible mountainous scenery, you know, the cleanest air you could possibly breathe, the cleanest water in the stream running down by the side of their house. They've got no school run. They've got no worry about school fees for their kids. You know, they're the happiest people I've ever met. I've never seen so many smiles anywhere in the world. It was just incredible. And I think one time I sort of burst into tears a little bit, because it was a time when the families were harvesting the cordyceps caterpillar fungus, which they do every summer. And that is actually their main source of income. It's very valuable for Chinese medicine. And they had their extended family around, and there was about 6 or 7 kids, you know, under the age of 12, I guess. And I was chatting to the kids. I said, "Oh, what do you want to do when you grow up?" And all the boys said they wanted to be monks, and all the girls said they wanted to be nuns. And I said, "Why do you want to be a monk?" And they, you know, this kid, it just melted my heart. He said, "We just want to be the best people we can be. We want to learn how to be the best people we can be to our family, to our neighbors, to our community." And you know, and saying that with such a sort of genuine and authenticity that was just like, wow. You know.
Have you had many tourists go to the area, and what mammals are they seeing when they go there?
Yeah, so it started off quite slow, as you can imagine. You know, and that we set up the website and started to market it. You know, and initially it was really just friends of mine or contacts that sort of got to come, and then gradually word got out. You know, it's the best recommendation. You know, and then more people started to come. So I think in the first year it wasn't so busy, probably only about 20 groups of people. But the second year it expanded quite a lot, and we have a limit, so there's only a maximum of 12 people allowed at any one time in the valley. But I think at the end of the second year, it's something like 300 people, and we passed $1 million yuan in terms of revenue for the community at the end of the second year. And all of that money.
How much is that in dollars, roughly?
So that's about dollars. God, you're going to test me now, but I guess that's about £150,000.
Wow.
So it'll be, I don't know,
over
$200,000.
250,000. Yeah.
Yeah, and all of that money stays in the community, so nobody takes a cut. You know, the government doesn't take a cut. The Shan Shui doesn't take a cut. You know, I didn't take a cut, obviously, and so all 100% of that revenue stays in the community, and they decide how it's spent and how it's broken down. So, and in terms of the mammals people see, yeah, of course, the big target is the snow leopard, and I think the success rate is something like 70% of people see a snow leopard, and obviously, you know, that it will depend on how long you stay. So some people only stay 1 or 2 days. And of course, you know, the chances increase the longer you stay. But in addition to snow leopard, you know, there have been, I think it's probably one of the best places to see wolf. You know, some groups have seen 20 plus wolf. You know, which is pretty good. Lynx, a few groups see lynx. Brown bear also is there. It's not commonly seen, but they're around. They're mainly nocturnal. Common leopard is there, but they're rarely seen. Lots of blue sheep, Tibetan fox, red fox. Pallas's cat is there, but it's not easy. Leopard cat also, white-lipped deer, musk deer.
That's a pretty good haul.
Marmots.
It is good. Yeah.
Yeah, marmots.
Yeah.
Red deer also is there in smaller numbers. Yeah, it's and I think the thing about it is the wildlife there is fairly abundant. The density is quite high, and I think the density of snow leopards is certainly the highest that we're aware of anywhere in the world. So I think they've camera trapped more than 30 different individuals in that area. The flowers are amazing. I don't know much about flowers, but if you go in July, August, September, it's just awash with colour, and it's a special place for sure.
Yeah,
sounds wonderful. I was hoping to go in for just before COVID started. Sorry, my dog's scratching. So yeah, it's still on my list of places I'd love to visit. Sounds extraordinary. Yeah.
I think as much. I think that one of the things that a lot of people say when they go is actually the cultural experience is just as important as the, or it's just makes just as big an impression as the wildlife that they see. So I think the experience of actually living in a genuine Tibetan home, or very authentic experience. It's not for everyone. It's very, very basic conditions. No running water, no toilets. You have to just find a tree. No heating, obviously. So it's not for everyone. It's for people that are prepared to effectively wild camp. But if you're prepared to do that, I think you're rewarded with a very special experience.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. Thank you. And we'll put up a link to the website, the website of how to arrange a trip there in the notes. But I know, Terry, that there's obviously some extraordinary exotic places around China, but there's also some really good mammals around Beijing, and that's something you've been working on, trying to help people see them and the birds. Could you tell us a bit about that project?
Yeah, so I think it's one side of Beijing that I think perhaps most people are not aware of, even Beijingers. So I remember during lockdown, I did an experiment with my contacts on social media around the world, and I said, what's the first word that comes into your head when you hear Beijing? And by far the most common response was pollution. And that's the image of Beijing. But there is another side of Beijing, which is much less well known, which is the wild side. Beijing has recorded more than 500 species of bird, which ranks Beijing second in terms of G20 capital cities, in terms of number of birds recorded. So, it's way more than London or Washington, DC or Paris, Moscow, which is largely because of its position on a flyway, on a major migratory route for birds. So the vast majority of those species are migratory. They don't live in Beijing all year round. They just pass through. But then, it's not only birds. So we also have here more dragonfly and butterfly species than all of the UK, just in Beijing. And the mammals are pretty good as well. So, I'd say the jewel in the crown is the leopard cat. So there are very few major capital cities that have wild cats. But we have the Amur leopard cat.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
In Beijing. And it's actually not that uncommon. It's very rarely seen because it's primarily nocturnal. And you might have seen that during the Winter Olympics a few weeks ago, there were 2 sightings of leopard cats on the downhill ski slope. So one walked across when they were doing a rehearsal for the medal ceremony. A leopard cat walked across the back behind the people on the podium.
Oh wow!
Which was filmed by somebody on their phone. And then another a Xinhua journalist photographed one as he was stood sort of halfway down the downhill ski slope on the edge, was taking pictures of the skiers as they came down, and he sort of felt a presence behind him, and so he looked round, and on the edge of the wood there was this leopard cat sitting on a rock sort of looking at him. So he managed to snap a few pictures. And so that was a bit of a story here.
I bet,
During the Winter Olympics, was the fact that you had these leopard cats around, and great opportunity to raise awareness about leopard cat in Beijing, because very few people know about it. But then, of course, we also have we have two species of badger. We have Asian badger and hog badger. We have wild boar. Perhaps one mammal that a lot of people see even in the city centre. I get a lot of people asking me, well, what's this thing I saw in the Hutong or on the street last night when I was walking home from the bar? And invariably it's the Siberian weasel. They call the Huang Shulang in Chinese, which is said to possess special powers. It's said that it can sort of possess your soul if you look into its eyes. So people respect it, they don't persecute it because of that superstition. So they're fairly common around, even in the city centre. We get Ammo hedgehog. We have raccoon dog. Red fox is pretty rare, but they're around. Siberian roe deer in the mountains also. So yeah, it's not bad, and in fact, they do say that we can expect common leopard to be back in Beijing in the next few years. So they were here until the 70s, and they were persecuted, and they sort of retreated into this mountain range to the west, the Taihang Mountains, sort of, and in Shanxi province. And that population now is, because they're protected, there's much less persecution, they're increasing. And so they're starting to move back along this mountain range towards Beijing. And one was camera trapped, really not far from the border, a mountain called Xiaowu Taishan. And so people are expecting the first photo of a leopard in Beijing, for many, many years, to come in the next few years. So that would be very exciting.
Wow.
If there are domestic dogs in Beijing, then the leopards will follow them. Trust me.
Yes. I think there's no shortage of prey. So
yes, indeed.
It would be an encouragement not to fall over when you're skiing as well in the Winter Olympics, I imagine.
Right. Yes. So, Valley of the Cats aside, can you tell us about some of your other favorite natural areas in China, and also some of your most memorable mammal encounters?
Yes, I think my favorite place, there's still a lot of places that I haven't visited. I'm very fortunate to have, I think, visited all the provinces except for 3. But I think my favorite places have to be, the plateau definitely is right up there. I love the northeast forests of Inner Mongolia and Heilongjiang and Jilin. So right on the edge of the taiga forests. And I've been up to a town up there called Wuerqihan, which is right in the north of Inner Mongolia near the Russian border. And it's a spectacular place. It's an old logging town. And in summer, in spring and late spring and summer, it is just full of birds. It's like an orchestra, early morning. There are cuckoos everywhere. There are flycatchers and ruby throats and thrushes and all sorts of crakes and rails and cranes, and it's just unbelievable. Like nothing I've ever experienced. And so I love to go up there in June. It's said to have lots of good mammals also. So it's supposed to have lynx. Tiger's not that far away from there. It's got bear. It's got elk or moose. I'm not sure which one you get in North China, but so it's a good place for mammals as well. But the mammals are tough to see. So it's brilliant for the birds, but mammal watching up there, I think, is tough. Sichuan, of course, I think is. I remember John McKinnon was telling me about why Sichuan is so special. Is that the temperate forests there are extremely biodiverse, and he said that before the Ice Age, temperate forests were as biodiverse as tropical rainforests, but the Ice Ages wiped out quite a bit of the biodiversity from the temperate forests around the world. But apparently the temperate forest in Sichuan was largely protected by the geography. And so it retained quite a bit of its biodiversity. So
you were telling us earlier about a place where there appear to be lots and lots of Pallas cats, and where the local people have lots of pictures of them on their phone.
Yeah, so I think my favorite mammal encounter in China has to be my encounter with Pallas's cats in Qinghai. So back in 2016, it was actually on my birthday, the first sort of proper wildlife watching trip to Qinghai and Qinghai Lake, and saw this sort of gorge on the west side of Qinghai Lake, and thought that looked like a great place for a day hike. And so we sort of planned a day hike to get up early and go in and just see where it took us, and take a lunch and come back. It was snowing heavily early morning, so we sort of started quite a bit later than we anticipated. But then just walking in, sort of a movement caught my eye on the hillside, and I thought, what's that? And sort of got binoculars on it, and there was a Pallas's cat. Very quickly realized there were two kittens playing. It's like, oh my god. This was the mammal that I really wanted to see in China, and on my birthday, completely unexpected, just two kittens playing. Just I don't know how, I really don't know how far away they were, but not very far, like 50 meters maybe. And fortunately, I had my telescope and adapter with me, so I was able to get some video. And not long after, the mother came back with a piker, and sort of fed the youngsters, got excited and went running over to her, and she dropped the piker for them, and it's just an unbelievable encounter. We ended up walking away after having watched them for, I guess, an hour and a half, something like that. Wow. And we sort of continued with the walk, and then coming back, they were still there when we came back. Oh, wow. And in the afternoon, and enjoyed them some more before and that was definitely my best mammal encounter ever, because it was just so unexpected, and at that time it was definitely the mammal that I most wanted to see in China. So extremely fortunate. But then, yes, this place that you mentioned. So last year, I was very fortunate to be able to, during COVID, it's been very, very difficult to travel to Qinghai and many places. But there was a window last year that opened up, when things looked very positive in terms of number of cases. And so I was able to join Shan Shui on a trip to the plateau to visit 3 other communities that wanted to, or were interested in, replicating the Valley of the Cats project. And so we wanted to go and meet those communities and to scout the places to see what they had to offer, especially if they had things to offer that would complement the Valley of the Cats, in terms of wildlife. We were sort of thinking the concept that we had in our heads was this sort of Qinghai Big Five circuit, that where you could stay with different communities and have a different experience each one, and hopefully see different wildlife. And one particular place we visited was called Suojia, and it's a very small place high up on the plateau, and it's sort of 4,500 roughly meters. And this place blew me away. So we got there, and I think it's sort of late morning. I was only allowed to be there for one day. As a foreigner, it's quite a sensitive area. So we got there late morning. We drove this track and got to this incredible sort of flat plain like area, and it immediately reminded me of the Serengeti, because there were herds of kiang, the wild horse that you get up on the plateau, Tibetan gazelle, there was Tibetan foxes, quite a few Tibetan foxes running around. blue sheep, and there was a very sort of slow moving river running through the middle of this plain, and there were hills either side. And so when we got to the hills, we sort of stopped and thought, "Oh, we'll have a scan." And one of the local drivers said, "Oh, stop here. Here's a good place." And so we stopped, got out, looked, and then almost immediately we saw 3 snow leopards. Just milling around on the hillside. And the local sort of guy looked at us and smiled as if he knew all along that they were going to be there. But it was an incredible place, and the habitat there is so different to the Valley of the Cats. And it's very rocky. There are very few trees or shrubs, and the locals said, "Oh yeah, here we have a lot of Pallas's cats." They said, "Oh, you definitely see a Pallas's cat." But I said, we didn't actually see a Pallas's cat, but we were only there a few hours. But you can see that the place looks perfect for Pallas's cats. And every local that we met had pictures of Pallas's cats on their mobile phones, so on their smartphones.
Now, giant pandas are, they must be the most iconic mammal in China, possibly in the world even. I saw them in the Kinling Mountains in 2005. There was then an ecotourism project, which I think was closed a few years later. What is the latest on giant pandas?
So it's tricky. To see giant panda is easy if you go to a breeding center or an enclosure or a zoo. To see them in the wild is very, very tricky. It's always sensitive for foreigners in particular to go into the core areas of nature reserves, and so it's the situation often is changing. Access can change at any point. Sort of one week you can be allowed in, the next week not. Without any warning or notice. I've never seen a giant panda in the wild. I've never really tried, so it's not something I've put effort into doing. I think if anyone wants to see giant panda in the wild, the best thing they can do is contact Sid in Chengdu, Sid Francis. He's based in Chengdu. He's a very experienced, and he's got a huge network of contacts, local contacts. So he is always on top of whatever the current situation is in terms of access and where you have the best chance to see giant panda.
So Terry, China has now risen right up there to our list of our ever-growing list of places that we obviously need to visit. Perhaps you can tell us exactly when China might open up again to foreign tourists.
5th of January 2024.
We will hold you to that.
At 3 p.m. It's a very good question. So it's very tough right now. I think it's very unlikely that this policy will change this year. And the people who sort of follow these things more closely than me, and who have better connections than me, tell me that they wouldn't expect China to open up to visitors until early next year at the earliest. And I think I would emphasize at the earliest, because I don't see yet any what the criteria are for changing that. But certainly I wouldn't be planning any trips for this year, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Right, good to know.
Noted, sadly noted.
Yes.
Yeah.
Terry, thank you so much. I could have listened to you or talked to you all morning. I think we just scratched the surface of mammals in China. That is just extraordinary, and you're doing some amazing work. It gives me hope for the future of the planet. If these sorts of things, that they're working there, and must be so rewarding to be doing what you're doing and to get to see snow leopards to boot, even better. So thank you very, very much for talking to us.
Yeah, you're very welcome, and thank you for having me on this podcast. Yeah, I do feel extremely fortunate to to be here at the moment, through this period, and to have the opportunities that I've had. Yeah, I think I've been incredibly lucky. So I will always be very humble and thankful for the opportunities that I've been given here.
Yeah, no, thank you, Terry. I have to admit, some of the places that you described sound absolutely astonishing, and I can well see a mammal watching or general ecotourism industry building up around those parts, particularly if snow leopards are that easily seen. So thank you very much.
You've been listening to Mammal Watching with Charles Foley and Jon Hall. You can find other episodes at mammalwatching.com/podcast.